This
Okay,
conference will
so
now be recorded.
there we go. All right, so in this webinar, we are going to be discussing goal setting, but in the domain of device trials. Very different from goal setting for ongoing therapy. Okay, there's our PCS symbol of assistive tech. I've scattered these symbols around the presentation just for a bit of fun. So, all right, let's get started in understanding who Liberator is. So just to be very quick, but we've founded around 13 years ago, all right? And we're a subsidiary of PRC and Saltillo. Now, if anyone doesn't know what subsidiary means, neither did I, and I had to look it up. Basically, we're the little brother of these two big American companies, okay? We started in Adelaide, and now we're across all states, territories, and all of our field staff are speech pathologists. So we started with 3 people, and now we're up to about 14, okay? And the reason why we've grown so much is because we do so much more than just supply devices, right? We're also AAC trainers. So these type of webinars, we're doing a lot of these lately, but normally we would go out to people's practices, clinics, and just deliver training on various topics. But we also provide therapy. We have 4 therapists across New South Wales and Victoria. They are excellent and really experienced. And we also offer a clinical supervision arm of the company, which Leanna Fox heads up. Okay, that's a bit about Liberator, where we're coming from. The consultants are the people you've probably had the most contact with. So that's me up the top there, covering Victoria, South Australia, and Tasmania. If you're in New South Wales, got lovely Joe. In WA, Freya, Kelly, and in Queensland, there's Jessica. So I would really love to get an idea of where everyone's from. I think it's quite informative for me. So if you guys can put in the chat box just the state that you're from, okay? So you can see me writing in there now, Victoria for me. We've got WA, New South Wales, Vic, New South Wales, WA again. Excellent. Okay, so mainly Victoria, New South Wales, which is understandable, but a fair bit of WA. Okay, excellent. Thank you, guys. That's great. So now we're all used to using the chat box. Feel free to chuck any questions in there, okay, about what we're talking about, and I'll get to it at the end. All right, moving on. Goal setting. Yes, this is how we can often feel around goal setting, okay, but it's going to be more exciting than that. So to start off broadly, I just wanted to again touch upon the point that for trials, for goal setting, it's a little bit different to ongoing intervention. So in trials, we're talking extremely short-term goals, right? We give you 3 weeks for a device trial, but by the time you get to it or you realize that the receptionist has been holding on to it for a few days and you get it out to the client, it's really kind of about 2 weeks. And it really is not long to see achievable goals for clients in our population. It is really challenging. So that's the first thing to mention, versus ongoing intervention, which is really you have short, medium, long-term goals. Goal setting within trials fits within the larger assessment process. Okay, so we'll get into that a little bit more in just a second, but that's really important to consider. Our goals are generally simpler. Okay, they have to be worded quite simply because our parents are the ones that are going to be interacting with this the most, especially in today's environment when they're at home. They need to understand these goals really clearly and succinctly. And so if we have something like Jimmy will produce fricatives in the initial position in CBC words 80% of the time, that really isn't going to suit the kind of intention that we have for parents. So they are generally a bit simpler. And I like to view them as being a mile wide and an inch deep. Okay, how much information can we gather across all these different domains in a really short amount of time in not much depth? And that is kind of different to our ongoing intervention goals, which really are like an inch wide and a mile deep, right? Because we're focusing these goals for a long time. We're getting a lot of information. So that can be a helpful way of looking at these 2 different goals. Goals for trials, mile wide, inch deep. goals for ongoing intervention, inch wide but a mile deep, okay? And I promise this is the only time I will mention the acronym SMART, because I'm so over that. But something to point out is that with our device trials, they probably should be SMART goals, but they aren't always, and they don't have to be, right? But if we're doing ongoing intervention, we really need to have SMART goals, okay? This is all from experience, observations, what we've seen work, not work across years of therapy, as well as across the many different reports that we come across and look over. So next, what happens if you don't have goals set, all right? And just before I get into this, this Judge Judy, I thought that was a picture, but it's actually a GIF. So I really hope you guys can see Judge Judy waggling her finger there. So what happens if you don't set goals? We see this a lot because we talk to many speechies who will get a device trial sent out. Maybe it's their first trial, something like that. The process is really quite new and unknown. And so they'll get the device, call us up for how do we set this up, what vocabulary should we use, blah, blah, blah. It's all a bit confusing. They haven't done a really good assessment before that to know even what system is going to be best, and they give it to the individual. Okay, so what do we see when that happens? And I'm sure that it's familiar to a lot of you because we've all been there. So after trials, you still don't know if the device you're using is right or wrong for the individual, okay? Also, you don't have a clear criteria to compare other systems to. And that is really important. We sometimes are comparing 2, 3 dedicated devices with an iPad. If we don't have these really clear, succinct goals that we can just have side by side to check out, our comparison is off, which makes the ongoing assessment, the report writing, all that much more difficult. Our trials can lack direction, so you don't gather the information you need. Okay, how do we know where to take the next trial if we don't get enough information clearly organized in the first one? And the big one is like parents can feel less supported and they can have less trust in the process if they don't see a really rigorous plan going forward with the device, okay? And a really important point again is that you miss information, specific information that can help you write the general assistive technology form that the NDIS require for funded devices, okay? And we'll get through a little bit later where the information from your trial goals fits within that report, okay? So we'll look at that a bit later on. There's also, the correlation between devices. There's a correlation we see between devices that get funded and device trials that have clear goals, right? Because the report just flows. Okay, so, and just finally, without goals, you really don't know what you're looking for. So don't be naughty, and we've got to have some trial goals set up. Okay, so 3 things that we're trying to gather when we're looking at trial goals. The first is we're looking for the suitability of both a hardware and the vocabulary of a system. Next, we're trying to gather information on improvements in functional skills, okay? Linguistic skills, physical skills in access, skills in how to negotiate social environments with the device. And thirdly, information that we can use in the dreaded GAT, all right? So that's what we're trying to gather with our trial goals. So you can see this, there's a fair bit there. All right. So let's look at a quick framework. I had only one of these circles, but it looked like a face if I had 2, so that's why we have 2 here now. Let me just have a quick look. We have, okay, great. I've just seen Joe's joined the conversation. So Joe, thanks so much for answering any questions that come up. All right, so in this framework, let's look on the left first. You can see that within the individual, we need to do assessment. Within that assessment process needs to be our goal setting. And after we set our goals, we do our trials. So you can see that if you start with the trial device, you have a new client come on board, maybe initial interview, yeah, we know the AAC is going to be useful, let's get a device happening. If you haven't done your assessment, you really don't know what goal setting to do. And if you don't do good goal setting, then your trials are going to be a mess. Okay, so we're going to focus on the goal setting component today. Or will be. We're going to have a quick detour because we're all coming from different places in this webinar. And so I need to capture everyone who may be just be getting started, but I'm sure there might be some information we're covering next that even the experienced clinician could draw from. So this assessment process, we should probably do a webinar on just how to assess in AAC. Give me a thumbs up or a yes if you can in the chat box if you would like that. But from our assessment, we discover information that will impact our goals significantly, okay? So as an example, in the assessment process, before we even get the device, we discover that this child's literacy skills is really quite poor, okay? Really important because many systems are really reliant upon literacy skills. I think we'll talk about that later a bit more, but maybe not. We'll also get information on fine and gross motor information, okay? What size screen can he access? You know, if he's, you're looking at him using his mum's iPad and he can barely finger isolate, or if the only finger isolation he can do is picking his nose, then that's really good information to have, okay, of how he's gonna access a communication device. Get information, if you're assessing on vision, which I know is hard to assess, you can do it. Self-explanatory, we have receptive language skills, but a really important one is this, is the working memory or navigational limits of someone, okay? So how many hits per screen can this child attend to with his working memory before he gets distracted, before cognitively it's too much? You know, what are those limits? Because if you're thinking, I'm going to trial this system with this vocabulary, but to access it well, you need to have 3 or 4 hits to be able to concentrate on, and he can only do 1 or 2 hits, then that's going to impact the goals and the system you choose. We need to know their ability to understand different categories. If you have a category system, okay, and they're not understanding even basic noun subcategories, then we're just setting up the client for failure when we're doing a device trial. The assessment will show you personal motivating things that you can involve in your trial, and we can see the functional limitations of their life, okay? So this is what our assessment gives us before we even write our goals. You need to gather information on all these factors so you can choose an appropriate system. So I just wanted to point that out. I put this together. It's not good, but it kind of gets across the point, what I want to get at next, which is imagine the individual on the left, okay? We have a short-term goal on a system we're trialing, which is this rectangular box, okay? Now, if our device trial goals are so simple that, let's just say, we'll get to an example, but let's say, let's go next page, demonstrate it better. Let's say a child can do, in this blue writing here, a max 2 hit sequences. They don't understand categories, except for maybe a couple noun subcategories, and they have no literacy skills. Let's say that your trial goal is for them to request more independently, or for them to protest appropriately by saying no. Nearly all call word systems out there, think one, it'll apply. They have these core words on their home page, right? And so choosing these words, saying more, saying no, you know, it requires no understanding of categories, literacy, or complex navigation, okay? Because they're learning, touch that on the home screen, boom, it says something, I get a natural reaction or consequence, and over time, I pair what that says, what I'm hearing, with my action, with meaning, okay? So that's if our goal is too simple. But if we look at, if we go back a page, the system we're trialing might actually be more complex than that. When we're getting beyond the home page, maybe we need 3 or 4 hits to actually reach mastery of the device. Maybe it's a category-based system, and a lot of our core words, a lot of our verbs and our adjectives, they're not picture producers, and so the picture doesn't represent what the word means. And so I generally have to use literacy skills to figure out what a word is, okay? But our short-term goal isn't looking at these factors. And so you might see with the device trial that, yep, they were successful. They reached all their goals 100%. But really, there's a big disconnect, because to reach mastery of the system, they need all these other skills which just couldn't be tested during the trial phase. So this just reinforces the importance of this assessment process before we select a system, because we can get blinded by a successful short-term device trial, which isn't really going to be appropriate in the long run. So if we look at just this very last point, sorry about this slide being so busy. I promise it's the only slide that is this bad. So what happens, this is drawing upon my point earlier, if you're trialing a system like WordPower, Pro, Low Quota Go, Snap Plus Core, they will achieve this example goal above, but the question remains, is it really appropriate for them? We touched upon that they need good literacy, navigation, and categorization for mastery of those types of systems. All skills that this child in the example above doesn't have, okay? But what that child needs is a motor planning system, okay? Because they don't have these other skills to fall back on. All right, I hope that gives an interesting or helpful foundation for what we're going to talk about next. And that is that, this is the last slide before we get to goal setting, I think. Know the makeup of the system you're trialing, okay? So you need a really good understanding of what skills the system you're trialing demands, and you need to match that to your client. So questions to ask yourself. You know, I'm sure you have a client in mind right now, someone who you're thinking AAC could be suitable for. What questions should you be asking? Let's go through them. So number one is, what language representation method is this system using? If that just sounds like Spanish, what I just said, or doesn't make sense at all, that's something to really look up on. Next, how much navigation is needed? Does the user need well-developed literacy skills? What knowledge of categorization is needed to scan the system to find where a word is? And is the system set up for motor planning? Meaning, if it's a motor planning system, consistent positioning of words, words are not repeated, simple navigation, and predictable patterns, okay? Just hold on to that thought when you're doing trials and before you set your goals. All right, so back to trial goals. Thank you for being understanding of that detour. Hopefully we're sort of all on the same level now. So when we're writing trial goals, we need two things. We need something to inform our goals, and also some structure that we can add to them that we can then repeat and compare to different systems. All right, so first up, what can we use to inform our trial goals? All right, if you've been in the industry for a while, you would have come across Janice Light's 4 occupational competencies, okay? But we also have another one by Blackstones and someone else, I can't remember, in 2009, and they added this emotional competence, okay? Or awareness of emotions, empathy, self-regulation, and self-efficacy. That is what emotional competence is, okay? And so we can use these 5 different areas, okay, to inform the type of goals that we might write up. So for those unaware, I will cover these very quickly. So the first one we can use to inform our goals is operational competence, which is really things like navigation, which we spoke about, you know, how to turn up the volume, how to turn on the system. For anyone who's used our LR7 devices before, you'll know that to turn it on, the button's really quite hard, okay? So it's those kind of things which we need to consider when we're thinking about operational competence. The next is this functional or social competence. And so this is when we might use a speech generating device to maybe complete interactions with someone, or when we want to talk about our intent of a topic, or to do some repair strategies, things like that. So, initiating conversation, maintaining conversation, that kind of stuff is social competence. So we can look at that if that's important to the individual in their situation. A third one is linguistic competence, which is probably one of the most familiar ones to us, all right? So improving language use, expanding utterances, using different parts of speech, things like that. Our fourth, strategic competence. This one normally traps people a bit. They don't understand this one as much. And this is kind of like when we are identifying when there's a communication breakdown, okay? Or it's knowing how to switch between AAC systems depending on the environment, all right? Emotional competence, as I touched on before, is things like self-efficacy, right? So these 5 components all help to inform what type of goals we should set, but we're always considering it within client personal factors, things they like, things they don't like, and we're sort of matching those up. In our AAC profile, if you've come across it, can really help. So AAC profile is an assessment measure / outcome measure that breaks down the first 4 of these into really achievable goals and stages. So you can look through and think, this person's using the AAC system, they're at stage 1 because I can see that they can only do this, okay? So use that as a something you can learn about. Okie doke. That's informing our goals, but we also need some structure to our goals, all right? So we need to demonstrate change, which is why we need a consistent goal framework. And we want evidence, or the NDIS want evidence of trial outcomes. And so if we have a measurable, a quantitative system that we can score skill development, and we can use that quantitative measurement for different goals, it provides a level of evidence that the NDIS want to see. So what is very common, many ways you can structure your goals. Today, we're just focusing on the goal attainment scale. And very quickly, it's a measure that helps to quantify a degree to which personal goals are achieved. Thank you, Wikipedia, very helpful for that. It gives us a clear picture of client skills, and it is evidence-based, which is nice. So on the right, you can see it. I'm going to assume that 80% of people have come across this before. That's kind of the feel we get when we talk about this with speeches. So I'll give a really quick explanation of how these work before we go through a whole bunch of examples and things like that. So that level 1 down the bottom, you can see a baseline, okay? That is where the client is currently at. You know, before they even get the trial device, this is a descriptive statement of where the child is currently at. If we look at that rectangular box in the middle, which is a bit darker, you can see that this is the expected level. After 3 weeks, this is where we really expect the client to get up to. Below that is less than expected. And the 2 notches above that, level 4 and 5, level 4 is they've exceeded this goal more than expected, and level 5 is this is just amazing, you know, blow your socks off kind of goal achievement, okay? So that's how it works. Normally, the level 3 you'll score with a 0. Okay, so if they achieve if they achieve their goal, they get a 0, which is a bit strange. I understand. If they didn't achieve it, if they reach level 2 only, that's -1. And if they remain at baseline, that's -2. Correspondingly, if they get level 4, that's +1, level 5, +2. So this is the quantifying sort of system we use, right? -2 to +2. Okay, so just recapping what we spoke about quickly is use Janice Light and the Blackstone article with those 5 competencies to inform decisions. We use a goal attainment scale to structure our goals, and we include personal factors to create them. But as mentioned, we do only have 2 weeks per device trial, so it can be tricky. All right, so take a bit of a breath there. I'm just flicking across the questions, and there's too much for me to read, so hopefully it's all covered, it's all good. Okay, so we are 26 minutes in. See, I told you I'll go over half an hour. All right, quick case study. By the way, these next 2 examples are from a resource which is called Ready, Set, Goal, I think. I don't know, it's by Saltillo, and it's amazing. So for those who want a copy of slides or want a bunch of resources that I'll allude to throughout, email me after and I'll send you these documents. So this is probably someone who you all have a client exactly like this. A 6-year-old boy with autism, right? Fine and gross motor movements are within normal limits. His hearing and vision is fine. Expressive language and receptive language uses 20 signs, 10 words consistently, can follow 1 to 2 step direction. Mum says he understands so much more than what he can say, and is unable to be properly assessed with standardized testing, and that he has some challenging behaviors secondary to loud noises and to sort of ceasing water play activities. I haven't written that down, but that's the case. So this child is currently trialing or using a NovaChat 8. Do I have an example? Maybe I do have an example. A NovaChat 8, okay, with word power 60 basic. All right. So let's look at a strategic competency goal. If you remember the yellow dot, it was one of the 5 competency goals that Janice Light and Blackstone mentioned. This is strategic competency. We're going to use the structure of a GAS goal. We're going to consider personal factors like the fact that he loves being outside. He loves water play. There are some behaviors which come to ending a water play activity, okay? So let's see some example goals. This is sort of our broad goal. So Matthew will directly select on his low-tech communication book, all right? He's trialing a high-tech, but we're referring to a low-tech here. Keep that in mind. When first modeled by his teachers and therapists 5 times during water play. So what does this look like in a GAS goal structure? All right, this is, it's not pretty. I apologize, you probably can't even see it. So let me talk through it. Up the top here in green, this is our introductory statement to explain his AAC system. This is kind of like a strategic overall idea, okay? So if we look at his baseline, it says level 1. On the left here, Matthew uses pre-programmed messages from his social page. If asked, what is that device? Or what is that? He will select a button randomly. He will get the device when directed. So that's where he's currently at. But what does it look like if he achieves the goal we want, which is in red here? When asked, what is that? Matthew will navigate to and use an introductory statement to explain the device, to 5 people. That's what we're expecting him to be at. So if he achieves that, we score him with a 0, which is great. So you can see on the right here, what we expect in 2 to 3 weeks. But if he doesn't achieve that goal, then we look down below, and that is when asked, what is that? Matthew will navigate to use an introductory statement to explain it to two different people with 1 gestural prompt. Okay, so now we have a prompt and we have him using it to less people. All right, if we look above that, level 4, Matthew will use the introductory statement to explain device to a variety of people in a variety of environments. So we have the same demand, but across different activities. And up the very top, you can see Matthew will use an introductory statement to explain his device when asked or to self-advocate. Okay, so that's again a harder demand. That's one example. The next one on the right is actually probably more helpful to understand. Sorry, that red box covers it a bit. But basically it's this. So Matthew, for the expected level, Matthew will directly select on his low-tech communication board, low-tech, given aided language input or modeling provided by his teachers and therapists 5 times during water play. Okay, so during the water play activities, when given models, Matthew will directly select on his low-tech. So what it's showing to us is that he can switch between a high-tech and a low-tech system, okay, when given supports. If he does achieve that at level 4, it will look like this. Matthew will directly select on his low-tech communication book, given modeling provided by his teachers and therapists during 5 times in art class. So another juicy activity, right? So we're needing low-tech. So it's the same demand, but it's a slightly different activity. It's less motivating for him, okay? And if he really smashes out the goal, blow your socks off kind of thing, it will be Matthew will directly select on his low-tech communication book during structured and unstructured activities that involve liquids. Okay, so now he's not really getting modeling, and it's across a variety of activities. Okay, ooh. That's an example of strategic goals. And you can see they're not SMART goals. All right, so still thinking about Matthew before we move on. This is a social competency, okay? So a different, one of those 5 competencies you mentioned. And just to remind you guys, it's the ability to understand and adhere to the social rules of interaction, okay? So last bottom point you can see, use speech generating device to complete interactions, communicate intent, and to repair communication breakdowns. This is some social competency skills. So an example of Matthew, what do we got? Our baseline, let's start there. So -2, if he doesn't achieve anything and he stays where he's at, we're going to be, Matthew can verbally answer, what is your name? Because he will select buttons when on the personal page, but he's not accurate in that response. What it sounds like is someone will navigate that page for him, which isn't good, and then he'll just sort of press something, okay? But if he gets slightly better than that, he might score a -1. It will look like this. Matthew will answer 3 personal information questions by selecting pre-programmed messages from a field of 5 on a personal page, okay? And if he reaches what we expect, this is our main goal. It will be Matthew will answer 5 personal information questions by selecting pre-programmed messages from a field of 5 on a personal page. Okay, we want him to respond socially through pre-programmed messages. We could go through each of these, but we'll jump to the top one. And you can see that if he blows our socks off, Matthew will answer practiced and novel, right? Novel questions relating to personal information to indicate I don't know. Okay. This information is crucial for writing a general assistive technology form for the NDIS because they want to see, does this device help him achieve social and economic participation, right? So this goal, you can directly use this and this information. You can compare different devices, the NovaChat, Accent, or a low-tech system, an iPad, and say, look, he only achieved this level with this device for this goal. He only achieved, -1, but for this device, it was 0 or +1. Okie doke. So a quick squiz. Did I do a typo? Potentially. Don't know what's going on. All right, back to the presentation. So let's go across. This is de-identified goals that I used for a client quite a while ago, but I thought I'll just put it up. Nothing's perfect, but let's have a look. So across in this one here, we're looking at linguistic goals, linguistic competencies, and social competencies. You can see that there's a rating system in the middle now, right? So let's look at some linguistic competencies in the middle here. My expected outcome for this client, who we named Mrs. Lady. So when verbally prompted to use the device, Mrs. Lady will use a single word, outside, mum, pasta, to request. That's kind of what I was expecting after the trial. If she did better than that, if she scored +1, it would look like this. When given an indirect, non-verbal prompt, okay, to use the device, the client will use 1 or 2 word combinations. Go outside, want, pasta, for example. So now we're just reducing the level of prompts. If she did really well, then she would independently use the communication device to request the desired item. For example, pasta, high five, but this is independently, okay? So you can see, we might have wanted to show that the client was independent by the end of the trial, but sometimes that just isn't possible in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's why our achievable goal is still, succeeded when given prompts or models. If you look across to the right, here's another one on social competency, okay? I should have pointed out, like, this client loved going outside, loved pasta, and that's the personal component, loved high five. That's the personal component which we tied in to the competencies, okay? So another example in the middle, our expected outcome was when verbally prompted, use your talker, the client will use one word, come or go, to direct a mother or father. If she succeeded that, then it would have looked like this. When given an indirect nonverbal prompt, she'll say it. And then again, she exceeded that, it would be independent use. We had some extra goals for her as well, one around protesting and one around operational competencies. But being mindful of the time, I'm just going to look at operational, then move on. So our expected outcome is, with a verbal prompt, where's high five, press high five, the client will be able to make a selection using 3 hits, 3 navigational hits to get to where she wants. If she succeeded that, or excelled, went past that and performed better, then the client will independently hit the first icon in a sequence to say a desired item. If she was even better than that, then she will independently use the device to make 3 hit sequences without any verbal prompts. So you can see that it's all just about structuring it, more difficult or less difficult, being mindful of what they can and can't and probably won't achieve, and then just putting a rating next to it, okay? And this is really powerful information that we can use in our general assistive technology form. So who knew that the PCS symbol of vomit was this? Well, that's what comes to mind when a lot of people, start this general assistive technology form. It's a beast. It really is. Let's have a quick look throughout this. All right. So where can I use information on the general assistive technology? Here's a couple of places, right? So section 2.42, we have trial of potential AT, describe the duration, location, and functional outcome of assistive technology trials, okay? So this functional outcome is exactly where we use our goals. And later on it says, what steps have been taken to ensure suitability of the assistive technology, okay? So this section is probably the biggest section of the general assistive technology form. This is where you report how the trial went, your goals, what you saw, the rating of your goals. So, when this isn't done well, when it isn't clear whether a trial was successful or not because we haven't compared them well or have a good rating system or something like that, this suitability part gets really confusing for the NDIS evaluators, right? So, but if you can show when we trialed an iPad with this vocabulary, they scored on the GAS goals -1, -1, 0, -2 because of these reasons, and this is an example, and then you compare it to an Accent 800 with the same vocab, but for some reason they're able to score 0 or 1 or 2, and this is the example, then that is really clear evidence that they need to say, yep, that makes sense or no. Okay, so this functional outcome and the suitability of section 2.42, this is where you can include information from those trials. And so even when you might not be able to hit all your goals here, so you can always just attach it at the end of your report as an appendix. We really recommend you do that. Here's another example of where you can include it. So part 4.1 and 2, you can see, consider and outline evidence how the recommended AT solution will assist the participant to pursue goals, objectives, aspirations in their plan, okay? So remember, we've included personal information in the informing section of our goals, okay? So in this section, we can outline the evidence with our goals. We can state how in the NDS goal, it was to do blah. Our goal linked up to that by providing the skill for this. And so that's when you can sort of pair them up. I hope that makes sense. That wasn't very clear, sorry. And in 4.2, you can see the social and economic participation components. So again, outline evidence, right? This is evidence from the trial, our trial goals, how the AT solution can assist the participant to undertake activities to facilitate social or economic participation, right? So remember, one of our 5 competencies was the social competence, right? So If you have a goal that links to a social competence, it's considering personal factors into that, then you can just sort of take your evidence and chuck it into this section of the report and talk about it. It makes it a lot easier. Next, PCS symbol of appendix. I enjoyed that. So we always recommend you attach your goals and any other PDF information into the back of your GAT. Okay, what I like to do is use a PDF merge, bit of software online, just to put my report, my goals, my client self-evaluation or rating scale, just include all of that and the quote into one PDF. That's what I like to do, because you can say throughout the report, refer to Appendix 1A or Appendix 2 for trial goals, and they really don't mind that, okay? Because if you're knocked back and told just use an iPad instead, you can respond to them by saying, did you read the report? Look at Appendix 1 for the iPad trial and look at how poorly suited it is for the client based on our evidence we gathered in the trial. Okay, so yeah, this self-rating scale, I won't go into that, but it is quite useful. You can sort of have a rating scale for Accent 800, this vocabulary. How easy was it to use? Mark it. Compared to the iPad, could you reach your goals? For example, yes, no, and you can sort of attach that at the end. But running out of time, so I'm going to just stop there. As a quick summary, what we spoke about, we looked at the dangers of not setting goals. We looked at the kind of information we're trying to gather, which is suitability of a device, functional competencies, and personal information for the GAT. We looked at the fact that goal setting is part of the assessment process. We looked at the danger of just having short-term goals if we don't know how a system is really structured for the long term. And we looked at, for informing, Light and Blackstone's competencies, for structure, the GAS goals, went through some examples. So any questions, which I saw there was, I'll have to look through those in a second. Chuck them in. Hopefully I was clear. If I wasn't, I'm sure I can get back to you. Hopefully there was not too much blasphemy taking place around AAC. Get in touch with your consultant. If you have a question that we can't answer or that isn't appropriate for us, the head office details are there as well, okay? Some references. All right, and that's it, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now.